right. Thank you so much for being here. It's important, and it gives us so much support and an uplift to see this many people interested in this topic, because it is a life and death topic, isn't it? I have the honor of introducing our esteemed panel tonight. Our first panelist tonight is Stephen Harper. He's the Executive Director of the Florida Center for Capital Representation. Mr. Harper is a clinical professor at Florida International University, at the College of Law there, where he teaches a course on death penalty and serves as the supervising attorney in the College of Law's new death penalty clinic. Next, we're going to hear from our guest of honor, Ron Wright, Jr., the most recent exoneree, number 27 in Florida and number 159 in the United States. Mr. Wright was convicted in 2014 and acquitted in 2017. I believe, however, he spent 7 or 8 years incarcerated, and he'll tell you more about that. And Christine Henderson is our third panelist. She's the national organizer for Equal Justice USA. Ms. Henderson has an extensive history of working with communities and youth to improve the juvenile justice system at all levels. She has worked throughout Florida, in Jackson, Mississippi, and a variety of other communities in the Southeast to further advocacy and litigation efforts with Southern Poverty Law Center.
Jurors make all the factual decisions in a case. There was a case called Ring versus Arizona, and in that case, the court ruled that judges can't make factual decisions. Only jurors can make determinations of fact. That's our constitutional right. Okay, so Hearst stands for the proposition that about 150 people who are already on Florida's death row will have a resentencing. There were about 400 people on Florida's death row, and some of them who had a 7-5 jury recommendation are not going to get any relief at all because their case was finished prior to Ring versus Arizona coming out. That's horrible. So it's the luck of the draw. If you happen to have some legal issue that's still going and your case is not completely finished, you are in the running. If your case was over and it's finality, you lose, and that's a horrible thing. Another case the Florida Supreme Court ruled on is Perry versus State. And in Perry, this is a really important decision, it was already mentioned, but Perry struck down the Florida legislature's revision of the state's capital statute because it did not require a unanimous jury. And that's a big one in Florida. Florida was an outlier, but now nearly every other state in the United States, about 2 or 3, require a unanimous jury recommendation before somebody can be sentenced to death. If the jury now is not unanimous, then if one juror says, I think the person should live, I don't want him to get the death penalty, and 11 jurors say, we want him to get the death penalty, he lives. Okay, and there's different reasons for that, but the Florida Supreme Court has found that to be constitutionally required under both federal constitutional law and also Florida constitutional law. So where are we now? Again, the bad news is that there's still too many cases resulting in death sentences. I was really excited, euphoric, that the death penalty ground to a halt, and the law changed wonderfully. Florida law now exists like most other states, and that's a good thing. But there are still too many death sentences in Florida. The good news is that of those 19 people, so far, 19 people in the state of Florida who were sentenced to death, the prosecutors said, wait a minute, this is not a death case anymore, we're going to waive death penalties. So 19 of those people who are on death row are now off of death row. So you're going to see the death row population in Florida go down from 400 down to the low 300s. That's going to happen. And other cases, it's going to get litigated. But we're going to have Hearst resentencings. The polling that we've done and that has been going on. Even in, like, for example, what was the last poll? One was in Dade County, the other was in St. Petersburg. St. Petersburg, right. The statewide polling has found that the majority of Floridians would prefer life without the possibility of parole as opposed to the death penalty. And even in St. Petersburg and Miami-Dade, the numbers are much higher than that. So that the legislators are actually behind what the public wants or doesn't want. That's good news. The other good news is that in the United States itself, the death penalty is on the decline. It is slowly disappearing. The number of people being sentenced to death, the number of cases in which prosecutors are seeking death, the number of cases in which juries are imposing death, all of those are going down.
Oh, okay. As you were told earlier, yes, I was convicted of a capital crime and sentenced to death. Last July, concluded 8.5 years of that ordeal, and I came home. First of all, I had no idea that these organizations existed. And for those of you that don't know, I was a police officer. I did over 20 years in the United States Air Force, reserve and active duty, as a law enforcement and counterterrorist operator. The 3 years that I spent on death row, I want to say thank you if any of you participated in some of the cards and birthday cards and letters we got, because I kept asking, where is this from? Who are they? How do I write? And no one had a clue. So I got to see that quite often up there, and I think that made a lot of guys' days up there, and it was very well received, and a lot of them are very grateful for it. So thank you for that, and thank you, of course, for your efforts in fighting this death penalty. It took all 7 justices unanimously to decide that there was absolutely no way I should ever have been accused or charged, much less tried and convicted, not to mention sentenced to death. It's hard for me to kind of get into the prosecutors' minds and share with you what they were trying to do, other than win. That's really what it boiled down to. I learned something throughout those 4 weeks of trial, and that is that the trial is not about the truth. The trial is about which of those two sides has the better story to convince 12 people to vote their way to them. I sat in pretrial confinement for 5 years before I went to trial. It took 5 years to get that thing into a courtroom. After I was convicted, I waited, I think, about another year before sentencing. I think the trial ended in February of 2013. I wasn't sentenced until August of 2014. And then the Supreme Court reversed in May of last year, and they basically told me, you ain't got to go home, but you can't stay here, and sent home in July. If the highest court in the land can determine that we have effectively bad law, anybody who was sentenced under a bad law should deserve the benefit of having that error corrected. I hear this word closure all the time. And again, this is my opinion. It doesn't exist. The only way to truly give closure to anybody, at least for me, give me back what was taken from me. And that we don't have the power to do. You want to punish somebody? That's why we built that jail, that prison. A life sentence, if so deserved, so be it. But a death sentence, we can't undo that. It's one thing bad enough we can't give time back. Why go even further to take the risk of doing something that we can't undo? I personally feel like if we're not going to do it right, why do it at all? What's the point? Thank you.
Thank you.
everyone. Once again, my name is Christine Henderson. I'm an organizer with Equal Justice USA. Equal Justice USA is a nonprofit organization that focuses primarily on ending the use of the death penalty. They have been a part of campaigns that have ended the death penalty in several states up north, 7 states, and I'm here in the South. So we have a journey, but I have faith. I always have faith. It's important for us as Floridians, as residents, to use our voice and say, what are you doing? When you know, we were going back and forth with the Hearst decision, and you know, and they were saying, hey, this is unconstitutional, and our legislators decide to go in the back room and say, well, we don't really want to do unanimous. We'll just say 10-2 and see where it takes us. So with that process, another year goes on, and you know, people are just illegally being sentenced to death, and it was allowed. But then the process kind of found itself and was like, wait a minute, no, this is wrong, and you have to. But it was a lot of attention, a lot of noise that was happening in the state that kept this conversation going, right? Yes. When you have Jacksonville, 54 faith leaders across denominations, across faith, joined together, signed a letter and demanding that Angela Corey stop the use of the death penalty, yes, because they are tired of being one of the top worst counties on a national and state level. That shook the tide. Angela Corey's gone. Because I know Nancy mentioned this before, but they're on a national level. There are 16 counties on a national level with the overuse of the death penalty. Florida has 4. That is our Jacksonville, our Tampa, our St. Petersburg, and our Miami, Florida. So justice should be fair and swift. The death penalty is neither. And I think that's something we have to start to really consider when we always dangle the victims. This is for the victims. Because it's so important to understand that and I can't stand or sit here and say that everyone feels the way that some of the families that we are fortunate to work with here in the state who are against the death penalty. But usually, from the work that we've done, that initial pain, that anger, that hate, when you lose someone, is real. And no one is saying that it's not. You have every right to feel that way. You have, you know, Darlene, when I spoke to her, she told me, I wanted to kill him myself. He took my baby, my daughter. You have to understand that pain and that guilt. But after a while, the family members who initially were like, I want that justice, I'm angry, they realize this isn't helping. They're not coming back. I still have to think of them. I still have to miss them. I still have to cry over them. This does not change anything. And now I have to go to court, and I have to deal with this for years and years. And a lot of times, these families that have been drugged back and forth to court over appeals, usually those death sentences that they were chasing for so many years end up becoming life sentences anyway. But I just want to also say that within the work that we're doing, we bring folks like Ron, exonerees from death row. We have family members like Juanita and Suzanne and Darlene that are willing to come to your churches, your community meetings. You want to put on an event, let us know. Reach out to us. Nancy, we're well connected. Joanne, she can connect with us, and we'll get them there. We'll take care of it. We'll get them out there. You don't have to worry about cost, because it's about awareness and it's about getting involved. And so please, please, please don't forget that we're here not just for support, but we can also help to get those voices of the people that you need to get out there as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.